But good afternoon and welcome to the NFWI talk, our virtual talk, our first virtual talk on the theme of trees, our environment, health and well-being. And as you know, it's World Environment Day, so what better day to have this all in place. My name is Maya Stevens and I am chair of NFWI-Wales. So I get to see, I'm a ex officio member of the Board of Trustees, so I get to see all sorts of things, but most of all I get to see what's happening in Wales. But before we start, can I draw your attention to the fact that this event is being recorded, and if you could please keep your mute button on throughout the event to avoid background noise. That is, of course, unless you want to speak, but that goes without saying. This event combines our passion for the environment and the work we have done in Wales over the past 2 years in protecting, preserving and planting trees under our campaign. And also it works with our campaign, Make Time for Mental Health. Under the very strange and challenging circumstances that we are currently facing, the connection between nature and our mental and physical health is more important than ever. Over recent months, the NFWI has been supporting members to connect safely with nature. For example, we have promoted the pollinator-friendly planting as part of the SOS for Honeybees campaign and launched a tree photography competition. And from what I'm hearing, I'm really wondering, I don't quite pity the person who is going to be judging that, but I think the competition entries are coming in thick and fast. I would also like to welcome our 3 speakers, Tom Jenkins from Forestry Research Wales, Jason Cockings and Lesley Parker of the mental health charity Hafal, and Lesley and Jason will start the session. Following their presentation, there will be an opportunity for you to comment or ask questions. We will then move to Tom's presentation, and again, you will have a chance to ask questions. I am going to be fairly strict and allow only half an hour for each of the presentations and questions. So if you could bear that in mind, and you will understand if we can't answer or ask all the questions. If you wish to ask a question, please could you use the chat facility, and we can try to get through as many of those questions as we can during the session. As chair of the session, I will be trying to have a variety of questions if that is possible, and we'll see where we go from there. But please do feel free to come and join us, speak, have your say. Cofiwch, mae croeso mawr I chi yng Nghymru pan fyddwn ni gyd wedi dibynnu ar holl peth ma. There will of course be a very warm welcome for you all in Wales when we have come to the end of this very difficult period. But thank you, and with those few words, I am now going to have the spotlight taken off me and put on either Lesley or Jason from Hafal. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mai. If I can start, what I'll do is Lesley runs the service that we'd like to particularly talk to you about today, but I'll just give you a brief background around Hafal and what we are as an organisation before we move specifically into the service that Lesley runs and supporting people to work with the environment and nature. So if I just start by explaining who we are. So Hafal is the principal organisation in Wales working with people recovering from serious mental illness, their carers and their families. Hafal was launched in 2003. It's an organisation that is led by the people that we support. They're the individuals who suffer with serious mental illness and their families. We provide support across all 22 counties of Wales currently. And Hafal is dedicated to empowering people with serious mental illness, and their carers as well. What we aim to do in that is for people to achieve a better quality of life, fulfill their ambitions for recovery, fight discrimination, and enjoy access to health and social care, housing, income, education, employment, social, religious and cultural beliefs. currently, the organisation is run by its members, as I touched on earlier. Even our trustees are people who have experience of mental ill health throughout their lives. We've taken the lead in promoting collective client participation at all levels through our partnership compact, which formalises clients' management of local services and engages clients in the membership, and the governance. So throughout the year, we hold a number of service user, carer and family events where people can come and talk to us, have those discussions, let us know what's happening in their communities and what they need them support with. In addition to that, then we also have our AGM, where we discuss all of our yearly planning and the future proposals that we're looking at with Hafal by being given the information from those people that we serve. The main part of Hafal throughout all of our services and all of the ones that have different type of backgrounds, different outlooks and different service delivery comes to our recovery program. And Hafal's recovery program isn't just about medication and the therapies directly relating to the symptoms of mental health. What we look at is we look at the person as a whole. So each person that comes to any of our services, they'll have the opportunity to go through the recovery program, and we'll look at things from a social care background and a social care point of view. So anything that may particularly affect the person's lifestyle, thus impacting their mental health. What we then do is we work with the individual to actually devise small stepping stones from where they currently are to where they want to be in their life, and the support staff such as Lesley, while doing the other support that they provide in the services, will support people through those avenues as well. The three main principles of this is that you take control of your own recovery, you take all areas of your life into consideration in planning recovery, and you act upon a step-by-step plan towards your recovery. The one other thing I want to touch upon just before I pass over to Lesley for you all is our Hafal Promise. So for some of you, you may be aware of it, for some of you, you may not, but we launched one of our campaigns called the Hafal Promise, and what we do within that is Hafal is committed to providing help, support, advice and friendship for all our client groups in Wales. This includes the carers, the families, anybody who's touched by mental health. Because we feel so strongly about this, we will take responsibility ourselves wherever necessary to ensure that we will not leave anybody alone. So this means that the services across Wales will never turn anyone away in our client groups. So as I said, I'll hand you over to Lesley now. It's just to give you a quick overview, I hope that's all right, around the Hafal as an organisation. And I'll hand you over to Lesley to discuss our gardening service in Cardiff. So Lesley leads on this. Obviously, we've currently been affected by COVID as a result of reaching out to people, but Lesley and herself and the organisation, we're constantly trying to look at different ways now, such as yourselves, where we can continue to reach out to people. Is it possible as well, we could have the spotlight turned on and I can share some of the pictures then for you to see for some of the services that we deliver on? So whenever you're ready, Les, if you start, and I'll try and share these pictures with you all.
Okay, not used to this. I can see somebody's out in the garden and I'm really envious, but I can't be in the garden with my computer. Anyway, yes, I've worked for Hafal for over 10 years now, and we're luckily based in the Museum of St Fagans, the Welsh Folk Museum, which is a beautiful place. We've got about an acre, which is divided into different kind of gardens. So we've got a polytunnel and a greenhouse. Ooh, gone. I've gone.
Yeah,
sorry. Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, and we've got a Japanese. Pardon?
We can still hear you. That's the main.
Oh, you can see. Okay, good. Yeah. So, that's the castle of the museum. They call it the castle. So that's our guys all. We would relaying the paths in that one. That was quite a hard job. We had to take all the old stuff up and put all the new stuff down. We do a lot of work in the museum to help the gardeners. They well, they give us lists of jobs that they haven't got time for, so which is great. It's really good because then the public can pass and say, wow, you're doing a really good job, which everyone feels really proud about. Yes, we got all different kinds of areas of gardens. So we've got a vegetable garden and fruit, and we've got a wildlife garden, a garden where an art therapist comes to do mindfulness sessions. And there's, you know, the normal kind of gardening jobs that everybody does. There's pruning and digging and weeding. And some people will come in the mornings and say, I need to be really quiet today. I need to be, just give me something easy, something quiet. And then I'll just find a patch that needs weeding. They can set up there, be on their own with themselves, you know, just making a difference, because when they stand back lunchtime or break time and they see that they've made a difference to that spot, that's really encouraging for them. Other people will come in and say, give me something to really get stuck into today. I really need to get digging, you know, need to get some anger out. So I'll give them some digging, pruning, sawing, whatever. So that is brilliant, because and the other thing is that if somebody's not quite right when they come in, and I can see that they're not quite, you know, not quite engaging with other people, I'll try and find them a job that takes them slightly out of their comfort zone, something that they haven't really done before. And what that does is they become, well, anxious on a different way, really. They become anxious as, am I doing this right? Is this what she means me to do? But while they're doing that, and usually, you know, I keep an eye on them anyway, while they're doing that, they're out of their head with whatever was bothering them before. They haven't got time for. Oh, so this is the herb garden. We maintain the herb garden. We didn't plant it out because they don't really know what they're going to quite get with us. But we cleared it and we topped it up with, can't remember now, a certain mix of soil and grit. And then the gardeners of the museum planted it out and we maintain it. So we weed it is mainly the maintaining. Yeah, and then we can take cuttings from there to grow on for ourselves. What else? Oh, this is our fruit bushes. In an attempt to stop the weeds, we've got weed suppressant membrane down there. Somebody's donated a fruit cage, which is brilliant. And then the council bring us a whole load of wood chippings every spring, and we're just covering all that weed membrane with wood chippings, which is a really, the fellas especially love that job. You know, wheelbarrows and shoveling, and, you know, makes them feel really good. And it's better than going to the gym. It's so much better than going to the gym. You know, they're fresh air, they've got companionship. And that's the other thing as well. Some people have spent a long time just in their bedrooms or just in their house, and they haven't really engaged with other people. They haven't really known quite where to go, and some are lucky and got family. Others haven't, or they're estranged from their family. And they come to the project and there is nobody ever going to say to them, what's the matter with you? There's nobody ever going to say that, because they know what's wrong. And although there's a variety of different mental health problems, they'll either approach that person and have a quiet chat, or they'll say to me, have you noticed that somebody's not okay today? You know, could you, and maybe I haven't noticed, maybe I've got a lot of people in and I'm busy concentrating on other things, but it's such a lovely way that they are with each other. Am I supposed to be answering the chat thing, or is that coming later? Sorry, I just getting way late. Coming later. Okay. Oh, so this was a really brilliant project. This is creating a natural dye beds for the woolen mill, where we're using plants that they used to use, or you can use naturally, to dye wool and cotton, or maybe other things, I don't know. So the task was for us to make these 5 raised beds all the same size. And then the paths all needed to be exactly the same size and everything, which is, well, it was interesting. It took a lot of problem solving. It was brilliant. It took us a long time to decide quite how to do it. And we started with a very far one. We got that squared off. And then we put the others in place to find out that they didn't all match. And so why didn't they all match? Because we'd cut all the wood all the same, which was really, anyway, really interesting. Everybody had different ideas. And you have to kind of just hold steady and think, what has gone wrong? And it was just that we'd screwed the woods. We'd screwed the edges in a different way. I don't know if I can explain that without showing you. So anyway, that was brilliant. We finally got it in place. We've done they're just doing the paths, then topping it up with compost that the museum had made, you know, homegrown compost, if you like. And then they gave us seeds, and we sowed the seeds and planted it all up. Don't know what it looks like now, but it was really good. And the guy from the woolen mill, which is right next to it, he was so proud of it that he has been maintaining it. We've hardly had to do anything because he took it on as his baby, which is brilliant. Okay, so what else was I going to say? We volunteer in Daffrin Gardens in the National Trust garden near Cowbridge, and mainly work in the Arboretum. It's very physical, that job, so the team of guys that come with me are up for that. That's what they want to do. They want to do sawing and pruning and lifting logs and filling trailers and that, clearing a lot of rhododendrons that have, and Portuguese laurel, I think, that have grown up and become wild, and so you couldn't really see the specimen trees for all the brambles and other stuff that was under there. So we've done a lot of that. In return, they give us a lot of plants and things like interesting bits of wood and logs and seeds. And then with them, we have some for ourselves, and we also work in the Heath Hospital in the crisis unit garden. So we take some of the plants there and some of the logs and stuff like that. And we've also been doing the crisis house garden, which is in Whitchurch, Cardiff. There isn't enough staff to do the garden, and it's been really, really overgrown. It hasn't been touched for quite a long time. So that's brilliant, because a lot of our guys have come through either the crisis house or the crisis unit. They've been there themselves once, or you know, more than once sometimes. And so they're giving back. It's a really positive way that they can give back to say thank you. For everybody praises the crisis unit and the crisis house. The staff are lovely. We've always been able to go in and have a cup of tea, and often they recognise the people that I've taken. I don't take the same people all the time. We give everybody a chance. And when they say, "Oh, how's it going? Haven't seen you for a while," it's just brilliant. It's just so lovely, you know, that they can see, well, the staff can see that the people have come on, that they're growing in confidence, that they're out and about, and they've got maybe not friends particularly, but they've got people that they can be with, that they're comfortable with, you know. Other people have made friends and they see each other outside of the project, and that's brilliant. I love that. I love it when that happens, and they're off doing, you know, one's growing tomatoes and another one's got an allotment, and so they'll compare notes and visit each other and help dig and stuff like that. And then I'm online, or rather I'm at the end of a phone call to say, we're not sure about this, or is this a weed, or, you know, I get a photo. What are we supposed to do with this? So a little bit of over the phone gardening, and then they get on with it. It's brilliant. We've got lots of herbs. So we have nettle tea for anybody who wants to try it. Most people, when they do try it, really love it. I love it. And lemon balm tea as well. When I explain that this is a tonic, doesn't interfere with your medication, just can lift your spirits. Most people who give it a go, not everybody. And we have loads and loads of apples as well at the project. So we've got a juicer left over from when there was a kitchen project. And so one year we had probably about 8 people a day having half a pint of apple juice every day for over a month. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I only worked 4 days, mine, so it's not, you know, not 7 days. But yeah, so that was really good. And then with the produce that we grow, with all the fruit and the veg, there's a lot of blackcurrants, but all the fruit and veg, we share them out with the people that come to the project, especially if they're struggling financially, to know that somebody is really struggling, and they might have gone to the food bank, but you can only have so many. To send them home with a carrier bag or 2. Oh, what's coming? Go away. Hang on, now we just turn this thing up.
Yeah.
Yeah, to go. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you, Les.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say, I'm just mindful we could talk forever, as you can see,
okay.
about the project.
Okay, yeah.
What Lesley does some endless pieces of work, but I'm just querying time, and I notice there's a lot of people popping a few questions.
Yeah, I
So
can't even
I
look
don't
at
know
them.
how we're doing for time.
Yeah, we are running short of time, but I do want to ask questions, and I know that part of this, the first person to come in was Anne Ettridge, and I suppose it would link in with my question as to how many people you have. But Anne, would you like to ask your question at the same time, please?
Oh, hi. I just wondered, have you managed to keep going with social distancing, you know, through the COVID crisis?
No, the museum is closed. So I'm on the phone to people. We're doing a lot of gardening over the phone, and photos, like, you know, they've done before, but even more so now. With a couple of people, I'm seeing them, I'm visiting them, but I'm allowed in the museum. They're letting me go in just to keep it ticking over until we go and all go back. And quite how we go back, that's still under discussion, really.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you ever so much, Anne. I have a question from Monica and Linda Wallace, very similar. So Monica, would you like to ask your question, and Linda immediately afterwards, and then perhaps that will help to move things forward.
Hi, yes. How are your clients invited, and how long do they stay with you?
So they come from the community mental health teams. Sometimes they come from social services, the forensic team. They can come from the crisis house or the crisis unit, the hospital, or they can self-refer. So generally we take people on for 2 years. That's the plan. Some people, when they come, they want to go back to work. This is their first step back into work, so they're not with us very long. They just want to build their confidence, get back out in the world, and then they're away. Other people, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So some people fall ill again, go back into hospital or in the crisis house, and then they come back to us, and you know, that can be quite repetitive for them. You know, it's not as clear cut as 2 years, but that's what we're looking at to try and make some kind of difference to them. And how many people did you say? Can be anything from 5 to 9. 9's too many, but it's rare. It's very rare. If it's 9, I take them all in the museum because I can't cope with them all. But 5 is okay. There's always somebody that's not well or got an appointment or something.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lesley. Linda, I'm assuming that your question has now been answered in that.
Yes, it has been. Only the other thing I wondered about was volunteers. Do you need more volunteers to work for you? And if you do, how do you go about getting volunteers?
So volunteers, if they know about gardening, they are really helpful. And if they don't know about gardening, they almost become another service user.
Mm.
So at the moment, I've got 3 volunteers that were service users, have been with me a long time, and this is their kind of progression, so that they can just take a little bit more responsibility. They haven't got a lot actually, but they're people, because they've been with me a long time, I can point them in the right direction and say, can you get on with that job? But I have had volunteers that are gardeners as well and really good with people, and they are fantastic. I don't really advertise. We don't really advertise for volunteers because they tend to be people that want to work with somebody who've got people that have got mental health problems.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to watch them twice, if you like, because they don't know what they're doing in the garden.
Yeah.
Yeah, the issues we
Thank
have
you.
is, no matter how much you'll hear Lesley talk about the amount of work she does, she is the service. So not only the more we bring into the service, unfortunately, because obviously we'd like to take it as far as we can actually impact the service then that Lesley's able to provide, because the more volunteers we have, the more work Lesley has to do then alongside supporting those service users.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Thank you very much. I think we've got time for one last question, and I guess in some respects, Maureen O'Grady, you have a progression question, and perhaps we'll see how that goes from there. Thank you, Maureen.
Sorry, I just had to unmute. Yes, is there a progression for these people to take work in the area, and can you find work for them?
I can't find work for them.
It's very challenging, isn't it, at the moment? I
Yes,
think what we do is we use our recovery program, as I touched on earlier. So, so when people come to Lesley can have a look at, from that person's perspective, where they are when the referral comes in, from the first time Lesley meets with a person to where they want to be. And in fairness to Lesley, I can say this hand on heart myself, she does everything possible to succeed with that recovery program. But, the current climate, prior to COVID, and potentially, even worse affected now since COVID, is a difficulty then to support people to that. And also, as Lesley touched on earlier, it's the transition of service users from where they're at to where they want to be, and anything that may unfortunately impact them across that transition and through that recovery program. But we do signpost to various organisations such as Cyfle Cymru, which is one of, it's a very good peer support service in Cardiff. It works right across Wales. Lesley's got some very good links with the job centres, but Lesley also work with New Pathways, if I'm mistaken, as well as one of the organisations you signpost through to quite regular as well. So we always try to have those communications and professional working links in place as best as possible. But yeah, the job market is a challenging one, and I think it's very challenging in Cardiff, to be fair, Les, isn't it?
The other thing to say about that is we did have a service user who was so keen. I couldn't teach her enough. She was so keen that the gardeners in the museum spotted that. You couldn't mistake it. And they took her on as a student. And she went on to get a temporary job in Daffin Gardens, which is kind of how we got there, really. And she's since been taken on full time, and she's got her working her height on trees with a chainsaw and everything. And she's there loving it, absolutely loving it. But she really wanted it. Not everybody who comes to the project really wants that. They just want to be somewhere outdoors doing something useful. It's not necessarily that they want a job out of it. Some do, and
it's a means to an end then, really.
Yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you both, Jason and Lesley, for that insight. And I know from, obviously being in Wales and the beautiful surroundings that you have, both in St Fagans and oh, it's gone. My words have gone from me. Dufferin, yes.
Yeah.
You know, it is a wonderful environment for them to be there. And I'm sure that, you know, drinking the apple juice as well when you make it has other health benefits as well, if you are that way inclined. But and as well as being a delicious drink and thirst quenching, which probably we could do with in this weather. But can I thank you both? And I know that you will be staying on until the end of the meeting. So thank you very much. I now will ask Tom Jenkins of Forest Research Wales. Tom is well known to us in the tree project, and he knows of us very well, but we will see what he has got to say for us today. Welcome, Tom. Croeso ti.
Diolch. I'll just bear with me while I try to share my screen. I hope I get the right one. Right, hopefully you can see our presentation as an initial slide on screen at the moment. Yep. Okay. Excuse me. Right. Oh, first of all, the title of the talk. I was preparing this last night here in the shed, and my daughter was watching me, my 12-year-old daughter, and I'd posed the title as a question. And she immediately said, "Don't be stupid, Dad. Trees are essential for the future of Wales. So make that the title." So hence the title this afternoon. Okay, so quickly, I've met a number of you, but not everybody. I'll quickly run through who I am and what I do. I act as the head of the Forestry Commission's Forest Research Agency in Wales, which for those of you in Wales is not a part of Natural Resources Wales. I lead the Forest Research's technical development and training team, and also Forest Research's technical services unit. So I have 35 operational staff based across the 3 devolved administrations. And I'm a professional forester by training. For those of you that don't know anything about forest research, we have a GB-wide remit, and we work closely with the forestry bodies in England, Scotland and Wales. And I have the pleasure of managing staff at each one of these locations, except at the moment I don't have anyone in Inverness, and I don't have anyone at Sylvan House in Edinburgh, although I do have staff at the Northern Research Station. I'm professionally involved in growth and yield modelling, forest growth and yield modelling. I was responsible, partly responsible for the implementation of the Forestry Commission's Woodland Carbon Code, which is an example of an ecosystem service. I am involved a lot in tree health, policy and research. I work with stakeholders to help develop and promote forestry and forestry policy, particularly within Wales. And I'm also involved in communication and liaison. So my aim today is to try to raise a little bit of awareness and to stimulate some discussion on the changing climate, both physical and societal, for trees. So this afternoon, what I'd like to do is to very briefly touch on the ecosystem services, outputs, I guess is another way of describing it, delivered by trees, time horizons and nested cycles and the problems caused by those, the importance of setting objectives, a little bit about native versus non-native tree species, which is always contentious, a little bit on the impact of climate change, and throughout, I might touch on pests and diseases. So to start with, I'll run through some of the ecosystem services delivered by trees and woodlands. So these include things like reducing air pollution, delivering cultural services, so space for recreation, physical health, providing support for mental health and well-being, providing employment, an area for developing education and skills, allowing people to connect to nature, and encouraging social cohesion. So the sorts of community projects to do with woodlands would greatly increase social cohesion. landscape aesthetics. So I don't know about you, but I love looking at wooded landscapes, and the tourist board for Wales very often will have pictures showing wooded hills and some body of water. So it's a very attractive landscape. Other ecosystem services include contributions to water quality, flood mitigation, slope stabilization or preventing landslides, and also increased agricultural production through agroforestry, protective farm woodlands, shelter belts, and the like. This is not an exhaustive list, but just some examples of some of the benefits provided by trees grown in Britain. We were asked by the Welsh Government to put a value on this. So in a 2017 study by Forest Research, estimated the following values from Welsh forests in 2015. And it was just for 4 of the ecosystem services that I've mentioned. Actually, I didn't mention timber extraction. That's a good one. Timber extraction, £28.3 million in 2015 from Welsh forests. The estimated value of carbon sequestration was around about £108 million. Around about £85 million was brought in through recreation in forests. But the biggie, which was a surprise to me, is improvements to air quality, which was estimated at around about £385 million. So for 1 year, trees and forests in woodland contributed in the region of £600 million to the Welsh economy. And this is a year-on-year thing. So woodlands are managed sustainably. So each year they should continue to deliver the same sort of value. So I've just put here the figures for 4 years from 2012 to 2015, just for 3 of those ecosystem services. I didn't have figures for recreation other than for 2014. And you'll see that in each year, air filtration provides by far the biggest contribution, but that it's at least £500 million of value to the economy each year. Okay, we'll move on. So I would say, let's go back to that previous slide. I'd be very interested to see what the value is in 2020 in terms of air filtration, because obviously there's a lot less traffic on the roads, a lot less dust being kicked up, a lot less active industry because of the COVID lockdown. So it'll be interesting to see if that figure drops for 2020. So I'd argue more trees and woodland in Wales, in fact across GB, the better for the economy, health and mental well-being. And when I talk about woodland, I'm talking about forests, woods, woodlands, all trees in the urban realm, in public and private spaces, on linear routes, waterways, and in amenity areas. So all trees count towards this. Forestry is extremely long-lived. Trees are long-lived. So objectives need to be clear. We need to know what we want our trees and woodlands to deliver now, but I think more importantly, we want to be able to specify what we want those same trees and woodlands to deliver 200+ years from now. And this is where these time cycles come in, because as woodland custodians and professional foresters, the woodland's going to outlast me. And professional foresters must be able to contend with incompatible time horizons and cycles. And just to give an example of 3 of these, we typically work to a 1-year financial cycle. We don't know what the budget's going to be necessarily year on year. If you layer on top of that a political cycle, 5-yearly political cycle, where priorities might change and policies might change, and the tree growth cycle, which is anything from, let's say, well, really 30 years up to, well, thousands of years, potentially. So as professional foresters, we have to deal a lot with try to juggle these various cycles, which is quite a challenge. We also need to answer questions such as, are our native species sufficiently resilient to be able to survive climate change? What will be the effects of new pests and diseases? And I spend a lot of my time sort of horizon scanning, trying to work out what is likely to be coming across the borders in the future. We need to ask questions like, when planning for the future, should we prioritize preserving our native species? And what is it that's important about nativeness? A lot of people put a lot of store by native species. I think we need to be looking at whether some alternative tree species could potentially better deliver what we need in some cases. Not in all cases, but in some cases. So depending on the exact definition adopted, there are in the region of 38 native broadleaf tree species, although some might be classed as big bushes, and there are 3 native conifers. And the definition of nativeness tends to vary. So one definition is trees that colonized Britain during the time at the end of the last ice age, about 10,000 years ago, and before the formation of the English Channel some thousands of years later. So trees that arrived after the Channel have formed are sometimes described as naturalized. And here's a list of all the native species. Those in red, beech, English elm, smooth-leaved elm, arrived later. And the only 3 native conifers are juniper, great for gin, Scots pine, and yew, great for making bows. There have been many subsequent introductions of native tree species since the formation of the Channel, and some continental tree pollen may have arrived naturally. So genetic nativeness is probably fairly rare in Britain. And there are no endemic trees. So there are no trees that are native here and nowhere else. There may be some subspecies, but no species. So if all the trees in Britain were destroyed tomorrow, globally, we would not lose a single distinct species of tree. So once again, our question, how important is nativeness necessarily in the bigger picture? So will natural selection not help? Well, the evolutionary pressures resulting from human-mediated environment change are likely to outstrip the pace of natural selection in longer-lived tree species. So if the climate changes quickly, the tree species just aren't going to be able to adapt. So we may see some species not being able to deal with changes in the water table, with drought conditions and the like. And also, populations of pests and diseases will generally adapt considerably more quickly to climate change than the host trees. So as host trees become more stressed, or some host trees become more stressed, pests and diseases can take advantage. So I'm going to argue that it's better to focus on long-term objectives and resilience rather than necessarily preserving the nativeness in what is a dynamic system. So I'm going to pose that we should consider which tree species will sustainably deliver the required ecosystem services over a minimum of a 200-year time horizon. There's no point in planting the trees now and getting rid of them tomorrow. And lots of emerging species research is being done within forest research, and there are many field trials. So the best one in Wales is probably at Brachfa Forest Garden in Carmarthenshire. Emerging species research is closely linked to research into climate change adaptation and mitigation. And we've developed a system called Ecological Site Classification Decision Support System, or ESC for short, which allows us to have a look at what tree species are likely to thrive both in the climate now and in the future. So very briefly, to get rid of some text and to quickly have a look at this, I did a quick look this morning at the soil, at the sorts of species that might grow where I am, which is on Anglesey, just up here, just below Holyhead. Not where that blue dot is. Obviously captured the wrong picture. Oh, here we go. So there we are. And Initially, it came up with actually not many trees are suitable. So the column labeled suit here, I don't know, hopefully you can see my mouse moving up and down over the screen. Whoa, we go back up one. Not many trees are suitable. Even things like sycamore aren't suitable. Well, I know sycamore grows brilliantly because it's growing in the garden here. So I just made a slight change to the soil. I think the soil type was incorrectly specified at an Anglesey level, or at a local level here. So by putting in something that more represents what we've got here, a lot more species became suitable. And it's quite an interesting tool to play with if you have the time. So very briefly, as we're running out of time, I'm going to say that we should be focusing on conservation of what we've got rather than preservation. So decide what the objectives are, decide why you want the trees, decide what it is about a wooded landscape that you want to preserve, what the iconic species are that you want to conserve. And let's look at a way of doing that using a mix of species, some of which may be native, some of which may be novel. The key is to plant the right trees in the right places for the right reasons. And there may be some opportunities for rewilding rather than engineered woodland establishment, accepting and, if needed, managing the resultant natural regeneration. So an extreme example would be to ban agricultural grazing within the Snowdonia National Park, and we'd end up with trees eventually cloaking the whole of the Snowdonia National Park, quite naturally. We need to increase public awareness and media attention, and the Women's Institute in Wales has been brilliant at doing this through their tree project. We need policy drivers. Well, we have the Wellbeing, Environment and Planning Acts in Wales, all of which are good policy drivers. Within Wales, we're just about to embark on a national forest programme, which is really good news. We have NRW area statements, Natural Resources Wales area statements, which will focus on the management of local areas. So different parts of Wales may be managed for different objectives, which again makes a great deal of sense. We need informed research outputs. Well, I would say that, I'm a researcher. And we need to consider species choice. So I'll finish with a quote, that our responsibility is to do what we can, learn what we can, improve solutions, and to pass them on. Richard Feynman was a physicist in the United States and a very deep thinker. So thank you very much. I'll leave it at that and open the floor for questions. I'll also leave my contact details on the screen just for a moment if you want to make a note of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Tom. It's as ever, you've got us all thinking, and there's a flurry of questions coming in here now. There's several of them I'm going to ask on behalf of them all, is how do you put a value on the air quality and, you know, that monetary value? I know I believe there's a formula, but perhaps you could tell people how that...
Yeah, putting a value on ecosystem services is really, really difficult. I'm not an economist and have, I'm lucky to have some colleagues who are very good at forest economics. I guess part of the value is to do with human health and the health benefits. So the removal of particulates from the air and trying to quantify the benefits to health from the removal of vehicle particulates. So that would be the key metric that's used for the estimation of value in terms of air quality. I'm very happy to send Maya the link to the reports that we did for Welsh Government, which explains the methodology. We adopted the Office of National Statistics method to start with, but it may well be that we move to a slightly more Welsh-specific methodology going forward.
Okay, thank you for that, Tom. The very first person to come in today was Fiona Barry. Fiona, have you got your question?
Hi. I'm a climate change ambassador, and I actually do a module on trees as part of our delivery to the Cheshire Federation, and it says in the Conservative manifesto that they're going to plant 30 million trees every year by 2025, which is extraordinary, because the National Trust, who have got millions of acres, are going to plant 20 million trees to celebrate their 125th year, and that's going to take them 10 years to do that. So the Conservatives have picked this number out of the air, and I emailed my MP and said, tell me, where are they going to plant these trees? And he hasn't come back to me, which makes me think maybe it wasn't going to happen, although he is a Labour MP, not a Conservative one. But 30 million trees a year is a huge amount. You'd have to stop farming some areas.
Not necessarily, but I can't comment on the politics or the the manifesto promises of any particular party. But I think that focusing on a number of trees is a bit spurious. Because it really depends on how you're going to establish those trees. So typically, if you were looking at commercial forestry, a typical commercial forest, you'd be looking at around about 2,500 stems per hectare to start with. And that would be for conifer forestry. Perhaps for broadleaves, you might think of only planting 1,100 stems per hectare, but I'd still argue that the denser the trees, the better the quality you'll end up with as you go forward. There is an issue with land, but I've been involved in some work in Wales looking at the potential for using some of the lower grade agricultural land, ALC 3B land, for establishment of trees. And actually there is masses of land available for the establishment of trees that we could use without compromising agricultural production. And again, it's a question of priorities. What do we want? Upland moorland is entirely artificial. It's a result of grazing. It's a result of management for shooting. So it would be quite possible to change, to accept some landscape change and to have a more treed landscape across Britain, or certainly in certain parts of Britain. And there are bits of Wales that I think would benefit greatly from more broadleaf trees in the valley bottoms. So it's a huge issue. There are lots of competing demands on land, and the grant structure for forestry doesn't help either.
Thank you, Tom. Can I ask, I'm sorry I can't say anything else. Your name that came up was N.A. I'm sure the question will be not applicable, but could you please ask your question?
Hello. I just wanted to ask, can you hear me?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Yes. I've read a couple of articles on encouraging developers to put in community orchards. Should that be a standard for all new developments? And is planning law tough enough on developers?
Really, really interesting question, and I could spend all afternoon talking about developers. I think one of the things that we need to do better is to educate developers as to how better to incorporate trees in new developments. And it may be that in some situations having some sort of orchard would be a brilliant way forward, but in other situations it may be that an orchard isn't as appropriate. The most important thing is to have trees that are going to be given an appropriate sense of place, to be appropriate for the environments, and something that's not going to grow too big and block light, something that's going to be relatively easy to manage, something that's going to be able to contribute to the, I don't know, traffic calming measures, but we need to educate developers and planners a lot better as to how to integrate trees both into new developments and into existing developments, as we redesign roads, as we make them more COVID friendly, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks ever so much for that. I've got a question from Val Pedrick. Val, are you there?
Hello. When researching which trees might be resilient, are you considering the effects and suitability of them for the native fauna?
Well, that's one of the points that I wanted to make, was that what we need to do is look at what the native fauna needs in order to survive, and to see if we can match the species to provide those conditions that would allow that native fauna to thrive. So there's a danger with just sort of coming in and oh, this tree grows well, we'll put it here. But I think there's also potentially a danger with not doing anything, with relying on the native species and finding that actually climate change eventually overtakes us and we lose the very conditions that we were trying to preserve for the native fauna. So it's a great unknown. There are lots of questions, and I think we just got to tread carefully. And for me, diversity is the key. Diversity of species and diversity of structure in terms of the trees that we're using and the woodlands that we're developing. But to look very carefully in terms of the long-term objectives as what it is that we're trying to conserve, what the conditions are that we're trying to develop. And I think of it in terms of what would I like my great-great-great-grandchildren to enjoy in the future.
Thank you, Tom. I'm going to take, I know it's just about 3 o'clock, but I am going to take one last question from Hilary Raven. Hilary, would you like to ask a question? Perhaps Hilary has left us. Hilary, can you hear us?
Did you mean me? Have you got the wrong surname and first name mixed up there? Bex Raven, Maya?
Sorry, could be.
Okay.
It was regarding targets, yes?
Yes.
That's it, that's you, sorry.
So hi, Bex.
Thanks, Tom.
Sorry.
That given the large targets, the large values that you're putting on all of these things, but the targets that are not being met that have already been mentioned, that we still need to increase the trees and woodlands across the country and obviously the other countries. Are there any funding sources available for individuals that are willing to actually start reintroducing woodlands into Wales?
Yes, well, there's the Glass Tier woodland programme, which is there's Glass Tier, which is it's effectively European grant money that's managed by Welsh government, is one source of funding. Unfortunately, there isn't, and it's a big challenge. I mean, it's people. There are a number of people who will establish just plant trees off their own back. The Woodland Trust have been brilliant at giving small trees for people to plant, but no, there's no major sources of funding, and that's one of the challenges is to look at how to encourage both individual schemes and community schemes for planting woodlands. And I think there's huge scope for having community involvement in woodland establishment across GB.
Thank you.
So I'm sorry I haven't really answered your question, Bex, but it's a...
No, that's fine. Thank you, Bex, and my apologies for getting you all muddled up.
No, that's fine. And if there isn't anything yet, then there isn't anything, and it's something that maybe we need to put a voice out there and say we need.
Yeah.
Indeed. Well, I'll come to that. And thank you all for your questions and for your participation today. And thank you especially to Tom, Jason and Leslie for their contributions.
You're very welcome.
I'm sure that whenever all of you who have joined, and there are many of you who haven't had the opportunity to have their questions asked, can I thank you? I'm sure we will all go out and we will plant trees in our gardens. They will be native trees, as indeed the people in Wales have been doing. And I hope that that is what we will do. We can look after them in our gardens. We can make sure that they are still safe and they are nurtured to grow properly. But can I thank you all, and I'm sure that you have found it, as I have, be very inspiring and a way to safely connect with nature for the benefit not only of our environment, but also for the huge benefits to our physical and mental health. Can I thank you? Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi gyd am ddod. Thank you very much for your attendance. We could have made this go on for a lot longer, I am sure, but perhaps it is the start of something and we will continue with it. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much and goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.